Hello and welcome back to another Yarnspirations tutorial. My name is Brittany and I'm the host over at B.Hooked Crochet, and I'm here today to teach you how to crochet a personal design of mine, the Staircase Crochet Afghan. Well, go ahead and grab your Caron Simply Soft Tweeds and your hook and let's get started. We're going to begin our blankets by creating a slip knot. And we're going to start off with a foundation chain of 32. So go ahead and chain 32. Once you have your 32 chains, we're going to locate the fourth chain from the hook and we're going to double crochet there. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go into the fourth chain from the hook. Now you can go into any loops that you would like. I personally like to work in the back bump of the chain. I feel like it gives you a nicer, a little bit more cleaner of an edge, but it is a little bit more difficult to work into. So we're going to double crochet in that fourth chain. And the rest of the pattern is so simple. We're going to double crochet once into every chain until we get to the end of our foundation. Okay, so this is what our work looks like at the end of the first row. Now we should have a total of 30 stitches and we're ready to proceed with row number 2. To work row number 2, we're going to chain 3, and this is going to count as a double crochet. Every time we do a chain 3 for this particular project, it counts as a stitch. So the stitch pattern is very simple for this design. We're only going to be working with double crochet stitches in the back loop only. So let's talk about that back loop only. If you rotate your work up like this, you can see a braid, and each one of these little V's is one stitch. Now when you're looking at your work like this, you'll have a front loop, which is right here, and you'll have a back loop, which is right there. So for this pattern, we're going to be working in the back loop only. You may be familiar with working your hook under both legs of the V, so that's what it looks like in that case. But when you're working in the back loop only, you're only going to catch the back loop. So the first thing we want to do is locate our first stitch. Now since this chain 3 is counting as a stitch, we cannot work our first stitch right here. That's really tempting to do. It looks like it should be our first stitch, but it's really not. We're going to work in the stitch that's right next to it. So turning it from here, you'll see the post. And then if you rotate it up, you'll see me catch the back loop of that stitch and then work a double crochet. So working in the back loop, it creates a little bit of a ridge, little decorative edging on your work. And so we're going to work in the back loop only for all of our stitches here. I'm going to make a double crochet in the back loop of the next stitch. And we're just going to repeat that until we get to the end of the row. One double crochet in the back loop of every stitch. And once you get to the end of the row, I'll show you exactly where you should work your last stitch. So once you're at the end of row 2, you're going to just be careful that you don't drop the last stitch here. So I have worked 28 stitches across my row, and that does include the chain 3 space there. And so I want to work stitch number 29 is going to be the last stitch that you can really see. So that last post or that last V that you're familiar with working into. but we can't end things there. If we do, we're going to decrease by 1 stitch. What we need to do is find our chain 3, which you can see that right here, and we're going to work our last stitch in the top chain. Now the view of it from here is the back of the chain. So this is sort of the back bump of the chain. If you turn it up to the top, you can see the V of the chain. Now that's probably what you're more familiar with looking at, and that's fine. You're just going to make a double crochet into the chain, and I would recommend catching 2 loops if you can and work your double crochet there. Now it's always a good idea to go ahead and count your stitches. Just make sure you have a total of 30 stitches before moving on to row 3. Moving on to row number 3, we're going to have a repeat actually. So we're going to repeat row 2 for 3 more rows. We want to have a total of 5 rows with color A, and we'll cover that briefly here. So we're going to begin by chaining 3, and you'll turn your work. You'll find the first stitch that you need to work into. Once again, it's not going to be this space right here because the chain 3 counts as a stitch. We're going to go for this stitch here, looking at it from the top, this stitch right here. We're going to work in the back loop only. For every stitch, we're just going to double crochet, and be careful about those edge stitches. Make sure you're getting your last double crochet worked into that 3rd chain from your chain 3. And it's always a great idea to count your stitches at the end of every row to make sure you're not dropping a stitch at the end. So that's what I would like for you to do at this point. Go ahead and finish crocheting rows 3, 4, and 5, just like we've demonstrated here. And we're ready for our first color transition. So at the end of row 5, your work looks something like this, and we're ready to fasten off color A, and we're going to pick up color B to work the next section. So I've just trimmed my working yarn. You can go ahead and pull that tail through the loop on your hook, and then we're going to turn our work. Now grab color B and create a slip knot and work your hook into the first stitch. Now find the first stitch, but you want to make sure you work it in the back loop only. Then place that slip knot on your hook, pull it through, and chain 3. And this is where our repeat starts again. We're not doing anything different here. We just have a new color. So that's really the only thing that's different here. What we're going to do is make 1 double crochet in the back loop only of every stitch. And again, we'll have a total of 30 stitches. And we're going to repeat this row 5 times. So we want to have 5 rows of color B, just like we had for color A. So we're going to evenly divide up this square. And that's what I would like for you to do at this point. Go ahead and crochet rows 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So 5 more rows using color B. Just as we've demonstrated before, we'll meet back up at the end of row 10. We'll talk about the final color transition for the starting block, and then we'll talk about how to move forward with the design. Once you finish crocheting through row 10, we're ready to fasten off color B, and we're going to make 1 more color transition. So just go ahead and pull that tail through the loop on your hook like we did before, and you'll turn your work. So now go ahead and grab color C and create a slip knot. And locate your first stitch, which is right where you fastened off. You're going to insert your hook into the back loop of that first stitch. Place the new yarn on your hook, pull it through, and chain 3. And this chain 3 is going to count as our first double crochet of this row, and our repeat at this point is exactly the same. We're just going to make 1 double crochet in the back loop only of every stitch for a total of 30 stitches each row, and we're going to work in this color for 5 rows. So what you'll need to do at this point is work rows 11 through 15 using color C, making 1 double crochet into every stitch in that back loop only, and then our first starting block will be finished and we'll be ready to start adding on to that. So go ahead and finish up these next 5 rows using color C and the techniques that we've talked about. We'll meet back up at the end. We'll talk about what to do next. Once we're finished working through row 15, now our blanket looks something like this, and we're ready to go ahead and fasten off color C, and then we'll see how this blanket's going to transition. So the first thing that we're going to do is rotate our work so that we can pick up stitches. We're going to continue on with the same color pattern. So we're going to do color A, color B, and color C, just like we did here. So we started with A, then moved on to B, and then moved on to C. Well, as we work this, we're going to pick up with color A, then move on to B and C. So the first thing that we're going to do is create our slip knot. And I'm going to find the post that is right here on the edge. And I'm just going to work my hook in between the 2 posts. Place that new slip knot on your hook, pull it through, and chain 3. Now this chain 3 is going to count as a double crochet. And what we want to do for this row is work 2 double crochets around every single post here on the edge. So this is our first one. I'm just going to work my next double crochet around the post and then move on to the next row over. So I can see this is actually a chain 3. I'm going to work 2 double crochets around that chain 3. And then I'll move on to the next row. I'm just going to isolate that post there on the edge and work 2 double crochets around that. And that's all we're going to do. We're going to continue on making 2 double crochets on the side of each row, and we'll have a total of 30 stitches at the end. So once you finish up that first row, your work should look something like this. And the easiest way to explain this pattern is just to memorize rows 1 through 15. So that is the repeat that we're going to follow through for the entire pattern, but we're going to be adding those rows to each of the sides. So as we build on the pattern, it's going to sort of grow from like a corner to corner fashion. So we have rows 1 through 15 that we worked up previously, and what we've done here was we've started row 1. We're going to work that same repeat 2 through 14 where we are right now. So just to get you started, you're going to begin row 2 by chaining 3 and turning your work. And you're just going to work 1 double crochet in the back loop of every stitch. So nothing is changing now from here on out. We just had that first row that was a little bit different because we're building it upon the side of our square, the first one that we created. So what we're going to do from this point on is we're going to finish working this color A section with 5 rows total. So we have row 1, we've started row 2, we're going to work 3, 4, and 5 in color A. Then just as we demonstrated back in the first square, we're going to transition then to color B. We're going to work 5 rows in color B. Once you finish that, you're going to fasten off color B and add on color C. You're going to work 5 rows in color C. Now, just to remind you, for every single row, we're going to begin each row by chaining 3 and turning our work, and we're going to make 1 double crochet in the back loop only of every stitch. And once we reach the end of the row, we're going to put our final stitch in that top chain from our chain 3 space, and that's going to finish off the row. So what I'm going to do off camera is finish crocheting rows 2 through 15 now on this side, and we'll meet back up at the end of this section, and then we'll talk about where we're going to build the next section. So once you finish this next section, our Afghan now looks something like this, and you'll want to orient it so that it's facing this direction. So this was our foundation row here. We worked our color pattern repeat to this point right here, and we fastened off. Then we turned our work and we added the same stitch repeat and color repeat to add this second section here. Okay, so you want to make sure you're looking at it like this so that the foundation row is at the bottom. The next thing we're going to do is take color A once again, and we're going to add on another section. So it's important for you to know that we're not changing anything as far as the color pattern or the stitch pattern. We're still going to work in double crochet stitches in the back loop. We're still going to work 5 rows of each color in this order. So color A, color B, and color C. What we're doing here is we're just adding on sections to various places in the Afghan, and the design will all come together in just a bit. What we want to do is find this top corner over here, and I'm going to insert my hook into the 3rd chain. So what I have here is a row of stitches that I can work into, so I don't have to worry about working around stitches. You can just insert your hook into that 3rd chain, and you'll place the new color on your hook, pull it through, and chain 3. And once again, this chain 3 is counting as our first double crochet. Now this time, since we are starting our new row, so our new color pattern repeat, we're going to work under both loops of the stitch. So we're not going to work in the back loop like we're used to. We're going to work under the full stitch, and that's just for this row, just because we're starting off this new repeat. So I'm going to continue making 1 double crochet into every stitch until I get to this next section over here. So we're going to have a total of 30 stitches, again including that chain 3. Then once you've made it to the section where your 2 pieces join, we're going to work 2 double crochets around the edge stitch of each row. So this first one here for me is a chain 3. I'm just going to work 2 double crochets around that chain. And then find the post of the next row and work 2 double crochets around that post. And just continue that until I get to the end. So for this new section, you're going to have another 30 stitches from this first one that we just created to the end, or if you're counting in total, we'll have 60 stitches from the beginning of this row to the end. So after we've finished that first row, that's the first of our 15 row repeats. So from here on out, we would just proceed with the same color pattern as we do here. So we'll do 5 rows in color A, 5 rows in color B, and 5 rows in color C. Now we'll just add on from where we are, but before you get started with that, I recommend you take a couple of stitch markers. So as we progress through the Afghan, we're going to proceed by rotating our work and adding on sections just like we've done here. So the first stitch marker I would like for you to place down at the bottom on your foundation edge. So just somewhere in that foundation chain, just to let you know that this is the bottom. This is where you're going to start every other repeat. So I'll talk through that a little bit more. Just go ahead and place your stitch marker in your foundation row. Now your other stitch marker, I would like for you to place that along the side edge here. Now you can put it, right next to your other stitch marker, that's fine. Or you can just put it somewhere in the middle. It really doesn't matter. What you're marking with these stitch markers is the side that needs to be closest to you when you're adding the new sections. So as you can see here, we've added on our third section with the stitch marker towards us, or it's right in front of us. Now after we finish crocheting this repeat, we're going to add on a fourth section, and we're going to do that by rotating our Afghans in this direction so that the other stitch marker is right next to us. So then we'll just sort of slide it down. We'll add on the new section along this edge here. Now I will cut back in and show you what the Afghan looks like after this third section, and I'll talk you through these steps once again, and again refer you to the written instructions so that you can be successful in finishing this pattern. What I would like for you to do at this point is finish crocheting your third repeat here. So you have the 3 sections of color A, B, and C, working 5 rows of each color, just like we've done for these previous 2 sections. Once you have that done, come back to the video and we'll talk about what to do next. So here we are at the end of panel number 3. So what we did was we started from this, with this first panel here. This is our foundation row. We crocheted up to this direction. Then we rotated, we crocheted panel number 2, and we rotated again, and this is where we left off before, where we added on panel number 3. So we're going to follow that same pattern. The next panel, panel number 4, we're going to rotate our work this way. We're going to fasten on here and work our 15 row repeat. Now if you remember, we placed stitch markers to help us know which direction we should be turning our Afghan to add on these new panels. So you always want to orient your stitch marker so that it's right in front of you. That's how you'll know you're on the right track. The other thing you'll do is pay close attention to the written instructions and the schematic diagram that's available with this pattern. Now that you have a clear understanding of how this Afghan builds upon itself, then you're ready at this point to start working on panel number 4. You're just going to fasten off where you are now. Pull that tail through the loop on your hook. And once again, you'll rotate your Afghan so that you have your other stitch marker right here in front of you. You're going to grab color A, fasten on in the side of the first row, work your first row just like we talked about back in this section here, where we work 2 double crochets around every stitch that's on the edge of the row. So you'll work 2 double crochets around this one, 2 around this one, and so on. So you've already seen all of this. I just want to make sure you're on the right track. And when I cut back into the video, I will have my entire Afghan worked out. We'll do a brief demonstration on how you can weave in the ends so they don't come out, and that'll be a wrap. So go ahead and finish crocheting the rest of your Afghan. We'll meet back up at the end and talk about the finishing touches. So after you finish crocheting your Afghan, you're going to have tons of little ends to weave in. You'll have the ends that are going to be on the edges of your work, but then you're also going to have some here in the middle. I'm going to demonstrate how to weave these in on the middle, but just know that this technique is going to work for weaving in the ends along the edge as well. So the first thing I want to do is thread the tail on my darning needle, and I'm going to find the same color. So the little stripe that coordinates with the same color, and I'm just going to run my darning needle under the under the bottom side of the stitches. So right where the stitches are connected to that row below. Now you could do this up a row if you'd like. I'm just working it here because that's right where the tail is coming from. So you'll just work it under a few stitches and then pull it through. And then we want to go back in the other direction. So I'm going to just skip this loop. So if you look here, this is the last stitch that I went into. Well, if I go back into that same hole, I'm just going to undo what I just did. So I'm just going to jump a loop over and now work my needle in the other direction. And one of the tricks here is to not try to be perfect with this. It actually works out better if you split the yarn, if you catch more than one loop or anything like that. Just when you're sort of messy with it, then the tail will have a tendency to stick a little bit better. Now once you're comfortable and certain that it's secure, you can just go ahead and trim that tail and then move on to the next one. So main takeaway points here is make sure you're weaving in your end, the color of the end, you're weaving it onto the stripe that coordinates, and then sort of be messy with it. Work back and forth as many times as you can, as long as your tail is. That's going to give you added security. So once you do that, your Afghan is all done.